All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, after a long break, we are going to first talk about the Men's Mental Health Month because I'm a health professional, including mental health, and we are both men. So we can talk about that. But if you are a female, please stick around because when men are healthy, women are healthy. When women are
Hmm.
healthy, men are healthy. So we're going to give probably a male perspective of this, but everybody I think could benefit from it because everybody goes through tough times, and we can uh, build on that all together. And it's actually good to understand men's mental health if you're a female because now you know what you can do on your end as
Yeah.
well. And then we're going to go into some stupid politics shit. The big bills coming out, the Iraq, excuse me, not Iraq, Iran, Israel stuff, the LA riots, all of that. So we'll go into all of that.
Couple things happened while we were gone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry we took so long. He had his family stuff, and then I had my face drilled into another time, and we had complications with that surgery. So as usual, a client of mine told me I have three ladies that come together, and they're all in the health field in some way, shape, or form. And we were talking about because they had to keep pumping me full of lidocaine because like every 10 minutes was not numb anymore. And I had a big I was probably close to toxic levels by the end of the 2 hour surgery. And I had a rebound from that after it wore off. And she was like, "Oh, you might have this gene where you're resistant to anesthesia." And remember when I had my colon surgery, they had trouble putting me down.
Yeah.
So I have the CGI genetic thing. I'm going to see if they have that as one of the things they
Hmm.
test for. So maybe I have the gene where it's hard to put me down. I just blame my mom because it's that stubborn Pollock blood. But
Well, you mentioned before the sleepwalking,
yeah,
somnambulism, and and so there probably is a gene for that because there's a gene for everything.
yeah, pretty much.
All right. Well, speaking of so actually that leads me into something that a thought I had that I wanted to get your take on it because you're the actual professional here is I had a thought kind of out of nowhere about mental health, a kind of a layman's definition, if you will. And it occurred to me that I think the a good way for lay people to think about mental health and getting mental health is what that means is if you have difficulty controlling your emotions, directing your emotions, you need um, psychological assistance. And that could, for God's sake, please don't get it off of Instagram or TikTok,
Hmm.
but you could start if you have a close friend group. For me, my psychological assistance starts with my wife and or with you of, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I'm struggling with this. What do you think?
Hmm.
If that doesn't work, then professional help is probably where you want to go. Then, after you give that the good old college try, um, similar, I think we're probably this sparked is I was thinking about what you'd said about things like Ozempic is don't start there. You don't start there. You don't start with the gastric bypass surgery. You don't start with the old fashioned calories in, calories out.
Hmm.
Then, if that doesn't work, then you may need to escalate. So,
Hmm.
if the psychological doesn't work and you find that it's not just difficulty controlling your emotions, you actually have an inability to control your emotions, well, that's when the psychiatric interventions come in.
Hmm. Which psychological and psychiatric. Psychiatric being the
Yes.
drug portion of it, the
Yes.
psychoanalytic being the therapy version of it, right? So, and actually in severe situations, we don't want to use drugs too much, but in severe situations, the combo of the two is the best result.
Yes.
Where you start with the medication but your ultimate goal is to be able to handle it without the medication. So you get the medication as a crutch, just like if you broke your leg.
Mm,
You use a crutch when you broke your leg, but at some point that bone's going to be healed enough that you can go ahead and put your weight back on it. You don't stay on the crutch the rest of your life. So that's the best results from a lot of the literature. But unfortunately, we have a medical system where they want you
mhm.
to stay on the drug.
Yep. So
But
that I was thinking about that and trying not to get grumpy because my own once a week treatments are supposed to be to help, and I try and clear my mind when I'm doing that. But it occurred to me, I kind of went down a rabbit hole on DMT and psilocybin, um, including some of the Y files had a really good episode on psilocybin and the early research that was done back in the 50s and 60s before it became illegal. Not
mhm.
just an illegal drug, but you couldn't even do research on it anymore.
Yeah,
And
I want to stop you before we
yeah.
go too far because I want to reach out to the audience here. If you got this far into it, I meant to do this like right at the beginning,
Mhm,
but if you got this far into it and you're feeling these things, you know, get some professional help. As Heath said, find a buddy. If you have insight on this, drop a link in the comments. And if again, if you're feeling this, go ahead and keep listening. And if you know somebody who's feeling this, keep listening because we might get to interventions. And I actually have a video. It's a Robin Williams video. So
mhm.
get your handkerchief or Kleenex or whatever you need to dab your eyes for it here in a little bit. Okay, go ahead and continue.
Um, well, the point being is it was really frustrating to learn, wait a minute, some of the experiments and research that was done 50 years ago found that these interventions had months, sometimes years, sometimes permanent positive effects. And that's not an option. But this thing that I have to go in once a week for, oh no, yeah, cool, we can do that. Seems a little suspect to me. Um, and not just yelling at the clouds about how that's annoying, but that's kind of the macro. But on the micro, if we're looking at what to do about it, um, oh, hello, that's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead and finish your statement, and then I'll go into what I just put up.
But the thought process for the micro should be the same as the macro of hey, let's not cut anything completely off, but also let's not just say we have a magic bullet here. Again, don't get your mental health advice just like you don't get your fitness advice from Instagram and TikTok, and especially if it's anything that is along the lines of the one simple trick. No, no, there's no such thing.
Hmm. Okay, so what I brought up for those just listening is, well, Jim and I came through for us on Google. Recent news suggests Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed a bill authorizing 50 million in state funds for clinical trials of the psychedelic substance ibogaine. This initiative aims to research the potential of ibogaine for treating conditions like addiction, depression, brain injuries, and PTSD. So we're making moves here,
What
and
is
would
ibogaine? What is that a derivative of?
it, oh I would have. Okay, ibogaine is a psychoactive compound from the iboga shrub. So maybe it's ibogaine. I don't know. Traditionally used in Central West Africa, currently, uh, ibogaine is a Schedule One drug in the U.S., which means it is illegal to use or possess. However, interest is growing in studying the psychedelic therapies
Mhm.
for potential therapeutic benefits. So there you go. All right, we're back. Uh, So yeah, people wouldn't expect Texas to be the first one to kind of be pushing this stuff,
Mhm.
but good on Abbott. There's actually only one thing he's done that I really hated. So we're doing okay here. Uh, what was the last thing you said? So I can.
Uh, of be wary of the one simple
Mm,
tricks.
Yes, what people don't understand with mental health is it's just like physical health. It takes a lot of work.
Mhm.
And the more trauma you've had or the longer you've let it go, the more work you're going to have to do. And now that we're in technically men's mental, actually, you know what I'm excited about? Maybe it's just my algorithm, but this year, Men's Mental Health Month actually overpowered Pride Month, which is the same month
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. So, at least in my algorithm, I'm getting more of that than the other. And I've pretty much spread myself out as far as the stuff I look at just so I can see everything. But yeah, it seems to be a pretty decent focus, which is great because we men are hard to read when it comes to that. And I think this is where the video comes in because everybody knows the story of Robin Williams. He was
Mhm.
the guy that made everybody happy. And I think even he acknowledged that if you wanted to say what was he was really like, it is the movie Patch Adams.
Mm.
So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And I'm going to bring this video up knowing that I don't know the rules on an interview for YouTube. So I will put a link of the video in the show notes for anybody that wants to watch it and have context for what we're about to see here. So this is an interview with Phillip Seymour Hoffman, and for those that know the whole story, Robin Williams committed suicide, and Phillip Seymour Hoffman died of an overdose, mixing different drugs, and a lot of times those are also purposeful. So
Mhm.
uh, it's about a minute and a half, or almost 2 minutes. You can tell me when to stop whenever.
Okay.
I rarely remember any dreams anymore. It's something I actually think about a lot, but
Yeah, it's crap. Why are we here? I don't care. Why am I here? What am I doing? Why aren't I gone?
yeah,
I feel this swell of hope, and then it's taken away.
day after day that can be wearing, and
Yeah, you can be the most brilliant guy in the world and still be upset, and still not handling life very well.
yeah,
I mean, an atheist suddenly finds himself walking around after death. He's got some serious reevaluating to do.
I think it's about. I always say it's about a lot of people's lives, but it's about a man's life.
And where's God in this equation? Because he made this.
Yes, yes, it's definite.
Why would you do that? Why would you give us this? This is it? Where is God? Where are you? Why don't you say something? This is like a jail. That wall. That wall. Yeah, that wall. That wall. Yeah, right, that wall. That wall. None of this works.
I think everyone felt that way that I know that I talked to. Ultimately, everyone is the lead in their own story, and then eventually life ends. And all those questions arise during that time.
Maybe that's why I'm here. I'm constantly looking for some kind of answer.
Yeah. Ultimately, you never get there, and you never really do figure it out, and you never really get the answer. And are you ever really fulfilled? And are you?
No, I'm a man. You're not the cure.
Oy vey.
Yeah. Okay. So if I have to clip it out for copyright reasons, you're coming back to us just up, and we actually watched it with no commentary in the middle. So watch that video before and then come back to us.
Well,
Uh,
it was hard to say anything because of the well, even had I watched that live, it would be hard to say anything. But in hindsight, knowing that those two people both ended their lives, and then you watch that and you go, "Oh boy, we should have seen that coming."
And this makes me think of the COVID days where they were bragging about how suicides went down, but we saw that ODs doubled.
Hmm.
And it's like, how many of those ODs were suicide? The lead singer of the Cranberries, they ruled that accidental drowning. She drowned in her bathtub.
Mhm.
with 3 empty bottles of gin and 2 empty sleeping pill bottles. That's not an accident. You don't
Yeah.
take 2 bottles of pills and then drown it down with gin by accident. Not even on
N-
a bender.
Now, maybe you are not consciously thinking, I'm going to end it all right now, but on some level, you're thinking, maybe I won't wake up
Mhm.
and maybe that'll be fine.
And that's actually the main point I wanted to bring up, because it's not if you're going through it, if you know somebody going through it, the signs are important, because you said earlier support system. But if you are part of that support system, you need to know what you're looking for. And for men, at least, there are very few cries for help. But you brought up the if I don't wake up, it's okay.
Mhm.
What you look for in men is giving up, is apathy. When the apathy hits hard, that's what you're looking for. Now, some will just tell you right up, straight up, like, "Hey, I think I'm going to end it all," or something like that. But for the most part, you need to get there before that, because you might be too late if they tell you. If you hear words like, "I am a burden on my family," that's a big red flag for me.
Mhm.
And I've talked to a lot of people. I have very interpersonal relationships with everybody I work with. And for the especially the middle-aged man crowd, especially former military, if you hear those words, "I'm a burden," or "what's the point," as Robin Williams just said, why even am I just spinning my wheels here? Is
Yeah.
everything going to be okay without me? Kind of stuff. And that's what to look for. The apathy, the numbness, the "I don't care anymore." And that's actually the main point I wanted to get across. So go ahead.
Mm, I was wondering, is there a statistic here? And I'm not, it makes me wonder, and I can't believe I can't find a simple answer for this because it seems like this should be, um, of course, even that number would be faulty based on what you said about
Well, hold on. I got a statistic
accidental
for you.
suicides. But it just made me wonder what percentage of male suicides occur after a job loss?
Mm, I'll look that up here in a second. But here's one for you. Approximately 15% of men report having no close friends, a significant increase from previous decades.
Oof.
No one to call. No one to call if you're having a hard time. 15%. That's what, 1 in 6? No, 1 in 7-ish.
Well, according to this Men's Health article from 2015, so a while ago, but this is worldwide. Uh, Researchers estimate that 1 in 5 are tied to unemployment. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wonder how that skews for men. And it's to that point, it's not just uh wow, it sucks to lose your job. It's to that your point of I'm a burden on my family. I'm just spinning my wheels. I don't have a focus. Um, and interestingly, I'm not going to play any of the video, but I'm going to share this.
I've got a stat for you too here.
Okay, go ahead.
68% greater chance of divorce after a husband lost his job. You don't think that's going to contribute?
Mhm. And then the compounding effect. So
Mm-hmm.
not only have you lost your job, but you've lost your family. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you've lost your focus. So interestingly, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole because I'd wanted to talk some Wheel of Time because I had some thoughts and it's never ending with that series. And I accidentally found this video. Oh, stop that. From somebody I had watched before, but I hadn't subscribed to. And then after this video, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and subscribe and check out some of your other videos. Um, he's a
Yeah, and
guy.
I'm just going to tell the crowd, send me the link to that. So if, again,
Mhm.
copyright things, if I have to clip it out, we'll have the
But I'm
link
not
in the
going to
show.
play any of it because it's really worth listening to the whole thing. As it's a guy named Greg Owen is the channel, and
Mhm.
the title of the video was "Wheel of Time failed because the modern writers don't know people," and that's really what it boils down to. And that's kind of what we were saying, talking all around the series. Is these the kinds of people that are now in these creative spaces don't know real people. They live in these strange bubbles that are not real life. And one of the points he made that I thought he made more succinctly than we did in our long ramblings when we went through the whole series is that one of the reasons Jordan's writing works so well is because so often people are right and wrong at the same time.
Mm.
That's real life, and he portrays that so well.
Well, and here's a duality for you within the male psyche. And okay, so the masculine psyche. I'm going to say the masculine psyche because some females can be this way as well. And this is probably why we see PTSD aside, probably why we see higher rates on former military is okay, say you put yourself in the position of the wife. You want the man who would die for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The man who would die for you, and here's a duality here, is also the man who would die to not be a burden on you. And so we see with our military, they go off and they're willing to die for their country, and then they come back and realize they're a burden on the country when they're constantly in the VA and when they're not right and when they can't keep a job and
Mm-hmm.
you know so in your marriage again that man will die for you.
Yeah.
And if you end up in a situation where he is job loss, you just brought up job loss, where he is a burden on the family, he will die for you. And so know that as a partner, know that as a friend of someone who might be in that situation, and actively take part because they're not going to come to you looking for help for the most part.
This is why stories matter and why I've been defending Jordan Peterson from the right, from the people who are criticizing him and his exploration of the biblical stories is because and this guy Greg Owen brought up in this video the stat that's been going around recently. There have been a number of surveys that the majority of males don't read anymore, don't read fiction.
Hmm.
If they read, they're reading nonfiction. They're reading history, they're reading self-help books, they're reading whatever. But so take Rand as an example. He goes through all three of the boys and then talks about the female characters some too, but they all have their own flaws, and their flaws can all be boiled down to really something that is understandable, if not noble, that is taken too far. And Rand, as the main character, is the most extreme example of that because his great flaw is is what you're talking about, which is sharing your burden.
Mm-hmm.
His great flaw through the story, the reason he becomes so hard, he becomes brittle, is because he thinks he has to take everything on himself. He doesn't want to burden others with this incredibly painful fate that he has and this incredibly difficult work that he must do. And the more he takes on himself, the more it fractures his psyche, the more it strains him mentally and physically.
Okay, well, we'll stick with that fiction analogy. I think you're close, but you're not on it. I think you're hovering around the target. You're not right there. Because it's not that he won't distribute the burden. It's that he keeps running into the fact that he's unappreciated for the burden. And that's why
Yeah.
Min was such a pivotal character, because she was the one that kept appreciating him. And she was the only one. Because around every corner, he would do something that was burdensome, and people would take it for granted, or they would try to twist it to their own advantage. And that was the mental struggle he had. It wasn't that the work was being done. He could handle the work. He was a big, strong guy with a lot of mental fortitude and everything. It was the fact that it was unappreciated almost across the board.
Yes.
Which is why he struggled, because he was trying to unite nations, and they kept fighting with each other. So every bit of his work was going for nothing.
So you have this natural male inclination of duty and purpose, and now you're starting to take it too far, but that is being compounded by the fact that there's no one to say, hey, buddy, let me help you out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
hey,
Let me share
good
your
job
burden.
on that. Good job on that. Now, why don't you let me finish this so you can deal with this other thing? There were very few, if any, there to do that. And were it not for primarily Min, he would have gone off the deep end.
Min, M-I-N, is a character in the book.
Yes.
It almost sounds like you said men. I want to like clarify for those that haven't read the book.
Well, but because Min, M-E-N, less than halfway through the series, he loses his best friends. His support structure, to the stat you just brought up, he has two very close friends, you know, that they're all about the same age, and they're practically brothers. They grew up so close. And in the first several books of the series, that's how all three of them get through, is by relying on each other. And then they're gone. They separate to do their own things, and now it's him by himself. And who has he got to lean on? For a while, no one. And it really takes its toll. So that by the time this woman that cares about him comes along, and what is so important about her as a character and as an avatar for this ideal, is that she doesn't care about the title, or, you know, in the real world example, she doesn't care about the job. She doesn't care that he lost his job, right? Or that he's having trouble at work, because what she cares about is him, the person. And she makes that abundantly clear from the beginning, and she won't let him forget that. Whenever he starts to head towards that cliff, she reminds him, hey, I care about you, the man, not the title, the trappings, what everybody else is caring about, what you're caring about. Okay. You go ahead and you care about those things that are important, that you think are your purpose. I'm here to care about you.
I'm looking for a certain video. Have you seen the man with the wire spool?
No.
Okay, so you keep talking for a second. I'm going to keep looking for it.
That was another point that this guy Greg Owen made in his video that we kind of missed. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this specifically, that in some ways, the world, the setting for the world in Wheel of Time is an accident, because it was only the men who attacked the evil Satan allegory, and so they were all driven insane, and they can't use the magic anymore without going mad. But you also have to wonder, he kind of brought up, was this purposeful on the Dark One's part? Because, and he played the clip, one of the few good clips from the series, of Leandrin saying, this power is not meant for you. When you men use it, you corrupt it. And it drives a wedge between men and women. So the reason the Age of Legends was legendary is because men and women were the most complementary they could possibly be.
Which is funny because the modern dating scene, I've made this quote many times. This is my quote, is the problem with modern dating is men and women treat relationships as a power struggle.
Yes. And I'd
And
never thought of it in the I'd never thought about, because Jordan writes the gender dynamics so well that it's all, and there's all this subtext, and a big reason for the fact that there is a war of the sexes, both metaphorically like we have here, but also very literally in the Wheel of Time world, is because this wedge has been driven between men and women and they can no longer be complementary.
okay, so I'm going to play this next video, and this is the thing about, again, masculine. I'm going to use the word masculine energy when it comes to feelings. If we tell you something, take it at face value
Mm.
and actually listen to the words, because we're telling you directly. So if you've never seen this video, this is the man with the wire spool, reflects on manhood. I'll leave the link in the bio as well.
Hey, what are you doing? I came out to check on you.
Huh?
What are you doing? Thought you were working.
I'm looking at this.
What is it?
It's wire. It's a spool of wire. And I'm almost out of it. Can you see the spool of wire?
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost out of it.
Okay.
And I've had this spool of wire for like 40 years.
Did I share with some, by the way?
Yeah, you
Okay,
did.
cool.
I bought it like this it's on a piece of a long time ago, but it's like 40 years of my life is in the wire that's gone. Does that make sense? This is what's left.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm sad for you, but you're wearing your Jets hat, and I'm a little concerned right now that you're wearing your Jets hat. I thought that's why you were crying.
Okay, I'm done.
Didn't listen to a single word he said.
I hope that was on purpose for the funnies, because and hopefully to make a point that people would get, rather than going, aha, silly man. No. The point there is he's having an existential thought that might be a crisis or might lead to a crisis, because this is representative of where he is in life, and it matters. When your kids leave the house, when that tool, or heck, a fishing rod, it bothers me that a fishing rod I've had since middle school, and then I lost it, and it bothers me that I can't find the thing, because I had it from middle school through college, and then somewhere moving around it got lost, and I have no idea what happened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd you have plenty of fishing rods and reels when I go down there, but by golly, I want mine, because there's a lot of memories tied in that. And and it's not, so this guy, this is more like purpose, because he seems like a blue collar, hands-on worker type person. So there's purpose there. But for me, that fishing rod is a connection to my dad and my grandpa and my uncles, who all taught me how to and took me fishing. That is something we hold on to and we hold dear. And then when that is lost, it's what are you grasping at? What can I hold on to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's the song, Dirk Bentley, "I Hold On," and he talks about all the things that he holds on to, and the ultimate goal of the song is I want to hold on to you as well. So it's a love song, but he talks about all the little things. He's got the old pickup that he and his dad worked on, and his dad's gone, so now he keeps that pickup running, kind of thing. And we do that as men. Everybody thinks about men as just, oh, they're going to run around and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. No, we hold on to things that have value to us. And the things that have value to us are the things we worked really hard on. And that guy I mean, that was part of his life. He, like you said, he was a worker. That wire was part of his life. And it was almost gone. 40 years of his life. And what we do is associate. So that wire was associated with everything that happened in those 40 years. And what you associate with that fishing gear is everything you had with your dad and your grandfather and everything. So yeah, people think men are just so simple. And we are simple because we will say it. But if you read between the lines and all of these things, you're going to get it wrong.
It's a good example of something I see a lot that haven't said in a while is it's simple without being simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
There's just because something or someone is simple does not mean it's simplistic. You know, we talk about that with fitness, that the basics of fitness are very simple. It's calories in, calories out determines your weight. You know, strain on your muscles builds those muscles. All right, cool, got it. Now, how do you do that? That's where the simple starts to become complicated. And I actually saw this earlier a week or so ago, and I didn't even think to save it, but I was going around as a meme, and I'd forgotten because I'd gotten so used to frickin' June being Pride Month that it is also supposedly Men's Mental Health Month. And so this is why it was going around. Someone had shared it is a woman on X with a lot of followers, and she'd simply asked, how do you show a guy appreciation? Because for us women, it's pretty easy to have a simple thank you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
get us some chocolate, get us some flowers, get us a card, and that makes our day, even if it's not a special occasion, even if it's just a hey, I was thinking about you. Here you go, sweetheart. Guys don't really care about that stuff. So what do you do for a guy that equates to that?
I will say one right now. Most guys' love language is physical touch. It doesn't
I,
have to be sex. A thank you plus a kiss. A thank you plus, or if they're feeling down, like the best thing that woman could have done with the guy with the spool is sit down next to him and put her arm around him.
I was actually, you got ahead of me. I was getting there because
Okay, yeah.
so the meme was somebody, some manosphere type guy with a large following replied to her that really it's fairly simple. Tell him you appreciate him.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him he's done a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him that this project or work or what he does around the house or what he does with the kids or whatever, tell him he's doing a good job and you appreciate him. And there's the simple part, but where it's not simplistic, then is what you said, which is okay, but how do you best express that? And for most guys, it is physical. But to your point, that doesn't necessarily mean sex. Not that we'll say no to sex,
No, 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 no,
obviously.
no. We were happy for the
But
distraction.
yeah, but a kiss on the cheek, a hug, a squeeze of the hand,
Mm-hmm.
whatever to go along with that. The reason the physical is so important to us is because we associate that with we done good.
Mm-hmm.
We have done a good job and this is our reward.
Yeah, well, it's what it is to circle it back to the being the burden is you have to spell out how much you contribute. If you don't spell out how much they contribute, they're going to feel like the burden.
Mhm.
And that's actually the key to it, is you do this for your family and we love it.
Yep. Um,
Which actually we get the reverse nowadays. We usually get, oh, you did that? Well, I wanted it done this way. You did that for, you know what? God, but you also didn't do that other thing.
this is back to stories and why they matter. This is why it is so insidious, the MCU and the girl boss movement that has just ruined storytelling is so back to Wheel of Time. One of the points that Owen made in that video was about the contrast between the characters in the books and in the series. And in season 3, using Matt as a Matt and Perrin especially, but compared to Rand, at least Rand is doing something. But Matt especially in that third season, he's just there. He does nothing. He's pointless. What? Why do you think guys are checking out mentally from pop culture and from culture in general? There's nothing for them there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think that has an impact on them consciously and or subconsciously of this is what we think of you. Interestingly, as an aside, found out from that guy that one of the reasons Maxim exists and was such a big part of the story, that's Rafe's boyfriend.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Whereas you have all of these actual characters with actual source material in it, whatever. There's no there. It's, you know, the way these guys are treated in these stories is how they're treated in real life. And so why do I want to be a part of this? Why do I want to partake of this? Why do I
Mm-hmm.
want to, subject myself to this? And it is also, unfortunately, what is leading to the extreme of a lot of bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not
Well,
just the apathy, but you're also getting a lot of bitterness in there as well.
I didn't think we were going to go there, but okay, so we have a whole generation. So we're Gen X. Okay. Uh Gen Millennials are right behind us, and then Gen Z. And Gen Z is the young males that are coming up right now. And millennials are kind of on that border of all of this stupid shit.
Yeah.
Uh this is why this might be even more important at this pivotal moment, is because it's already hard, us at our age. Think of what it's going to be like for those guys that are going through what you just talked about when they get to our age. Because they may check out right now, right? But when they get to our age, what did they miss? And they're going to start thinking about it. What is it?
Yeah.
20%? I'm thinking off the top of my head. I might look up the stat here in a second, but 20% of men under 30, between 20 and 30, are still virgins now.
Yeah.
Something like that. And yeah, we don't want just people going out and, being rabbits out there. But at the same time, between 20 and 30, you should have found a female that is attracted to you at some point, right? But it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's not happening at all. So we're going to have a generation of people coming up that we're going to have a serious mental health issue, because finding a mate is one of the biggest drives in human nature, period. It is, I've always talked about this. I am always interested in drives that are counter to your own survival, and you will die to find a mate. And so, as a male, anyways, and yeah, by the time you're 40, and you're going to feel a loss eventually. Your video games and your Mountain Dew or whatever you have is going to be not sustainable at some point. And then what happens?
Yeah. Well, let's segue into the other things we wanted to talk
Okay, yeah,
about.
yeah. So again, if you're
And
drop a comment. This is part one. We're gonna it's all gonna be one video, but we'll go into part two, which is yelling at the clouds. But yeah, I wanted to get this one out because it's emotional for me. Uh, and I really believe in being in the health of the nation. It we're going to get into politics,
mhm.
but that's downstream of culture, and culture is downstream of our mental health.
Which is why I wanted to segue to the politics with The Master and His Emissary by Ian
Ah,
McGilchrist,
yes.
which you gave me because apparently you hate me and want to hurt my brain. Because holy crap, this book isn't just thick as in look how many pages that is. It's small print and every sentence is a banger. It's like, oh man. And so here, this is just in the preface. This is the preface to the new expanded edition. This is, I'm not even into the introduction yet, let alone the first chapter here.
Hold on, my
And
dog is whining to get in the room.
okay.
Let me go. Let him in.
Um, and so he says something here that is not just applicable to mental health, but it's foundational to the idea that, look, one of the reasons we're so fractured culturally and politically is because we are so fractured within our own minds. And so I love these couple of paragraphs here when he talks about how to think. And if we don't have that foundation, then we can't talk about anything worthwhile, let alone because we can't think about anything meaningfully. In an era where truth seems to be up for grabs, the questions of what we can rely on as true seems ever more pressing. In particular, I believe that reductionism has become a disease, a viewpoint lacking both intellectual sophistication and emotional depth, which is blighting our ability to understand what is happening and what we need to do about it. My current thoughts are directed towards illuminating what I see as a truer picture, a more helpful and I believe a more hopeful way of seeing our situation here on this planet while we still have time.
Mm-hmm.
This is the theme of my current thinking and writing. There are, it seems to me, four main pathways to the truth: science, reason, intuition, and imagination. I also believe strongly that any worldview that tries to get by without paying due respect to all four of these is bound to fail. Each on its own has its virtues and its vices, its gifts and its inherent dangers. Only by representing each and all together can we learn to act wisely, and each is a blend of elements contributed by either hemisphere. End quote. Hemisphere, the point of this book is he's talking about the hemispheres of the brain
Mm-hmm.
and how they work. And so he's setting up this idea that it's not either or,
Mm-hmm.
that just in the preface and in the introduction, he talks about how what we thought we knew about the hemispheres turned out to be not entirely correct. And so neuroscience kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater and said, well, this is all bunk. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
well, no, hold on a second. There is a there. It's just way more complicated than we thought.
Yeah, and one of the evidence for this is in a lot of research studies where they're studying like firing of the brain. A lot of times they only probe the left hemisphere because it's predictable. And the and if there wasn't a difference, what they're trying to do is eliminate a variable. If there was no difference, you would probe both sides because there's no variable to eliminate. But if you probe both sides, you have to acknowledge, and you get a different result. You have to acknowledge there's a difference between both sides. And we've got a lot of split brain studies because they used to cut, or I think they still do, the corpus callosum in the middle out for epilepsy. And then they would do these studies on these patients where they would blind one eye and have them do something, and blind the other eye and have them do something, or right left-handed or right-handed. And I mean, cool things like show me a duck. And if it was in the right hand, which is left hemisphere, they would write the word duck. And if it was in the left hand, they would try to draw a duck. And we know there's a difference.
Mhm.
The problem is the old school logic or the old school idea of it was wrong.
Yeah.
And which was, oh, left brain is logic and right brain is creativity.
Well,
that's
it was
completely wrong. Yeah.
it was too rigid. The idea was too rigid, I think is probably more what McGilchrist's point is, at least in the introduction, is that, yeah, okay, some of this was correct, obviously, but then we were too rigid in our thinking about what this means. And that's why I like his 4 ways of thinking. And it's why we do this, what we do as a conversation, because the two of us separately think differently. So when we discuss, we come up with something that we wouldn't have necessarily come up with on our own. Because to these 4 points, science, reason, intuition, and imagination, as he says, they're all 4 important, but they are all 4 individually incomplete. And so if you put different emphasis in different areas, it's going to lead you to different outcomes, and you need to be cognizant of that. And it's also why we need each other.
Well, and I do it with my work. I always tell people, okay, here's the program. This is the left brain. Now here's how to feel it. Right brain training. Or we're in right brain training right now. And so like my squat video, how should the floor feel? How should my body feel? Those are inputs coming in from the environment, which is what your right brain is better at. But then it takes that information and your left brain builds a heuristic from it. And that heuristic allows you to do it over and over and over again. We do it with language. As a baby, we babble. We babble, 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 and someone says, oh, dada, 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 dada. And you say, oh, dada, dada. Okay, so the input comes in, dada was good. And dada was good when that guy kept saying it back to me. So that's dada. And we just keep building on that, and you create heuristics, which is very efficient.
Well, speaking of rigidity of thought or lack thereof, something that I'd wanted to talk about last week, and then you couldn't because you got pumped full of drugs.
Drilled into,
that aren't healthy for someone with a congenital heart defect.
But they had to do the full bone graft and everything. It was like the worst that thing could have gone.
Well, of course, a week, 10 days ago, the big news was, Trump Musk split. And then after like 3, 4, 5 days, it's like, okay, now we're fine now. It's like, wait, what? And it looked like it was going to be bad. I mean, for crying out loud, Musk dropped an A-bomb when he said the reason the Epstein files aren't released is because Trump's in there. And as somebody pointed out, I don't remember who, we already knew that because his name was in Epstein's files as someone that he knew and tried to do business with, but that doesn't mean what you think it means. When we say we want the Epstein files, we mean, hey, why is Ghislaine Maxwell in prison for life for sex trafficking to apparently no one? How do you have a trial of a madam with no Johns? But apparently you can. No, that's what we want to know. Anyway, but
well, I know how you could have that, but it wouldn't be applicable to this. You could have them just all pay cash money, but
yeah. Well, anyway, it's interesting, but not necessarily surprising, because one, Trump himself has a history of this. I mean, look at the way he treated Ted Cruz,
Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State.
Marco Rubio. Yeah, look at the way he treated the people in the 2015, 2016 GOP primary who are now solidly on his side, and Rubio is a major figure in his cabinet. I mean, Secretary of State is a big effing deal, right? And so
I can equate this to MMA because I was there at one point when I fought Pedro Javier in Monterrey. My coach was like, "Oh, he's gonna get in your house and take advantage of your wife. I was like, I don't need that. I just want to win, you know? And I met him at the weigh-ins. He was kind of cool. And we were like, oh, loser buys the beer or whatever. And when I got in that ring, I punched him hard in the face a lot of times and I choked him out. And he kicked me harder than I've ever been kicked in my entire life. And then he bought me the beer afterwards because he
Yeah.
lost. And that's how men work. Speaking of
Yes.
men's health, that's how men work.
Especially men who are actually confident because they aren't threatened
Mm-hmm.
by this negative thing. And I was genuinely concerned because of where Musk has been most of his life. It made me wonder, was this conversion, so to speak, authentic? And the fact that he backed down, and which in part came from he commented, liked, reposted a number of not even big name people, but a lot of kind of randos saying, guys, can we bring the temperature down? What we're trying to do here, what you two are trying to do is too important to have this rift that becomes irreparable
Mm-hmm.
over differences. Yeah, you have a disagreement, but you know what? There's a bigger picture. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems like for now, at least, the whole Trump Musk blow up has become a nothing burger. And yeah, they're probably not best friends anymore, and they may not be working together anymore, but they're still seem to be working towards the same goal.
Well, and I'm more interested actually. So I listened to JD Vance on Theo Vaughn's show here recently, and they talked about the big beautiful bill. And I follow Rand Paul because he's probably him and Thomas Massey are my favorite politicians. And I think they're talking to each other without mentioning each other's names. And Vance brought up on Vaughn's show that, okay, here's the thing. We know about the debt. We know about all of this, but we also made a lot of promises.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to come through on those promises. And we need to address the debt. But 50, he said the biggest monetary increase, in fact, 50% of the increase in this new bill was the border protection. It was establishing the structure for the border protection, which was a big promise we made and actually very important for the country. And so that was he gave a very convincing argument. Any more detail, go ahead and watch that if you're listening. Now, Rand Paul on the other side tweeted, I think 2 days ago that, and again, I think they're talking to each other, but they're not tagging each other. He said, I would be willing to sign this bill as it is if there was in the bill assurances that we're not going to continue after a certain date or something like that. And so they're kind of going back and forth on that. So there is a willingness to compromise, but I am concerned of the fact that there is no resolution in there that, hey, this is for now, but also in 2 years this is going to go away. This is going to go away. This is going to go away, and we're going to follow through with the Doge stuff. So I like Rand Paul's take. I do wish we had more cooperation, and I would like to see the administration address what he said and say, hey, actually put in there some assurances that this is not going to continue.
I don't want to get deep in the weeds here, but I like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, but I don't know. I don't want to ascribe negative motivation here, but they should know better, because here's the problem with what they're saying is this isn't actually a budget. I haven't looked it up in a minute. I think the last time the US Congress passed an actual budget was either like 2010 or 2012. This is what's called reconciliation. For political nerd reasons, basically the reason they have done reconciliation every year since whenever that was is you only need 51 votes in the Senate because you can't filibuster it. Because it's not a true budget. It is just a continuation of the previous budget. So in order to do the things that Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and those people want, you would need a real budget. Most of what they want. Here's the other problem I have with their argument is something you brought up that transitions me to the bigger point is I am ideologically, I am totally with Massey and Paul and Chip Roy and those guys who are saying we are going to eventually the laws of economics come calling and those laws are going to be a face first into a brick wall or off a cliff, choose your metaphor, if China actually manages to do what it's been trying to do for years, which is remove the dollar as the world reserve currency.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason the US with our ludicrous amount of debt has not turned into the Weimar Republic or Zimbabwe, where you have to take a wheelbarrow full of cash down to buy a loaf of bread, literally look up hyperinflation in Zimbabwe and Weimar Republic and other places, is because we are the reserve currency, meaning there is a reason that all commodities are listed in dollars, is because on the international market, you buy commodities and you do currency exchange in US dollars. So that allows us to rack up this ludicrous amount of debt and not face the consequences yet. But we will eventually face the consequences. However, what changed my mind on the silly big beautiful bill were the LA riots. To me, the LA riots were the gunshot to the head. This was, yeah, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump reluctantly. And then, oh, you have been ramping up the temperature so much that someone literally took a shot at him, grazed his ear, a quarter of an inch, and we would not be having this discussion because he would be dead.
A turn of the head.
Yeah. A fortuitous turn of the head saved him from getting the back of his head blown out. All right. It's that graphic, that real. And that was the point I was, oh no, I have to vote for this guy because the left is becoming increasingly insane. Well, to me, that was the same with the LA riots, is because to Vance's point that you just brought up, a big chunk of this bill is for the wall, the border enforcement, and then the mass deportations that are going to be necessary because of the tens of millions of people that have been allowed to come in, allowed to overstay their visas, etc. And this is existential because you look at what, and LA is just the worst of it. It happened elsewhere, but look at what was happening in LA.
We had it here in Houston too. So.
There was some in Houston. There was some in Dallas. I think Atlanta had some, Chicago and New York. All right. You have the Democrat Party running interference for these people, protecting or openly helping them. And who are some of these people? You have literal radical Marxists declaring that there is a not insignificant chunk of Mexicans who think that the Southwest United States still belongs to Mexico. And they were saying this openly during the LA riots. That is why they're lighting cars on fire and standing there waving Mexican flags, not American flags. And a number of them were saying openly, you can't kick us out here. This land belonged to Mexico first. This is our land. That's who these people are. Now, whether they could actually do that and return all of what was taken in the Mexican-American War to Mexico, or whether they just want a kind of no-go zone, a kind of quasi-sanctuary area of their own where they get to do whatever the hell they want, which is kind of what they have already in the Western states especially. That is existential to the survival of America as America. And so that was the flip for me of, guys, we are in an existential crisis here that a lot of people have been warning. We are coming to this inflection point, And I think we're here now, which is you had better start getting rid of all of the people who are here who don't like America and actively work to undermine it, or there won't be an America.
Mm-hmm.
The debt and hyperinflation won't matter if there's no country.
Well, and the debt and hyperinflation is actually being made worse by the people who are acting up right now. I mean, it's one of those, if we rip the Band-Aid, we'll get better faster. But if we let it keep going, how much more debt do we get?
Yeah.
If we let it keep going, we're going to have to keep repairing. We're going to have to keep repairing. We're going to have to keep repairing. So, yeah, this is a tough one. This is the big beautiful bill is probably one of the most controversial things in the last 20 years because there are very good arguments on both sides. Now, the question is, what I would love to see, and this is where Elon would have been a big help to not have his falling out, is could we have increased the spending on what we were just talking about while decreasing the spending on a lot of other things that might be in that bill?
When it comes to reconciliation, not enough to matter.
Mm.
When you're talking about trillions of dollars, even billions of dollars barely makes a dent.
Mm-hmm.
So the basically the way reconciliation works is something like 2/3 of the budget is locked in.
Mm.
That's why you don't have to have an actual budget process because all you're doing is tinkering around the margins. So no, not really. And that's why I say I feel like Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, Chip Roy, etc. should know better. And I think to his
that's
credit,
why I brought up Rand Paul, because his voice wasn't get rid of it. His voice was we want assurances later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong there, because one of the reasons we are in this immigration debacle is because twice in the 60s and then again in the 80s under Reagan's biggest mistake was an amnesty program with the promise of increased border security and getting serious about enforcing immigration laws to deport people who come illegally or who overstay their visas. But that never happened. So we granted amnesty to all these people whose first act in coming here was to break our laws. Not a good thing. And then we never got the promised enforcement. And it's the same way with spending cuts. This happens all the time is we're going to have, tax decreases or increases now, and we will balance this out with spending cuts down the road. And then the spending cuts never happen.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not wrong to want assurances because we have a long sordid history of, oh yeah, we'll totally do this down the road, and then we don't do it. In contrast, the other big thing in the news here that is driving me crazy, where you don't see nuance, you don't see compromise, is what is happening with Iran right now.
Mm.
And this wasn't even on my radar a week ago.
Well, because it just happened less than a week ago.
And it happened big and fast.
Yeah.
And this is creating quite the rift on the right. But my impression, and I'm curious what yours is, because you lean more left and you look at different sources than I do, but my impression is that the rift is more with MAGA influencers and grifters than actual MAGA supporters.
I think you're right there. I think you're very much right there.
And I don't remember who I saw made this point that made me laugh, and I keep wanting to say it to every one of these, you betrayed MAGA, no more foreign wars, we can't strike Iran. So wait a minute. So all of you people who are saying that, going so far as to say Trump should be impeached if he orders strikes on Iran. So I guess you thought Top Gun Maverick was a tragedy because they made the shot at the end? Because that was totally Iran, even though they didn't actually say it was Iran.
I still haven't seen the movie, so.
Well, They are striking a nuclear enrichment factory of a rogue state. A rogue state that happens to have F-14s.
Well, and here's
There's
where
only one such place in the world.
I will make comments not to a specific country, but to a specific ideology. We do not want nuclear arms in the hands of a death cult.
Mm-hmm.
A cult that celebrates how you die is what I mean by that. And I always bring it up, the Vikings show. The reason the Vikings were never the good guys, even though the good guys in the show are the Vikings, they're not good guys. That's the great thing about the show, is they're not good, is because they celebrate how they die, and how they die is in fighting. And yeah, so if you have a culture that celebrates death for the cause, and that cause includes killing others, we want nuclear arms out of those hands as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't care what country it is. If their culture celebrates that, then we do not want a big effing death machine in their hands.
Yeah.
Look at what they do with a car. Look at the German Christmas market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at New Orleans. Look at what they can do with a car. What are they going to do with a nuclear missile?
Well, Trigonometry just posted a clip from, I can't remember her name, someone they interviewed 2024 sometime. And she talked about this. And so I'm not an expert on this, but I know a little bit about it. Is their theology is attached to something called the 12th Imam. And basically, the oversimplified version of what this is they bring about what, for any Christian, what happens in the book of Revelations. They bring this sect of Islam seeks to bring that about, and it will happen when they spill the blood of the last Jew. Their radical theology requires that they wipe Israel off the map and kill all the Jews that are there. And you think it's no big deal if they have a bomb? You are a little too rigid in your thinking there, friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing a lot of this online, and a lot of the MAGA people who I had suspected are grifters, and now I'm leaning more towards that, is the other part of the rigidity of this thinking is something we have ranted about when it comes to Trump in the first place, which is in these second two elections in 2020 and 2024, it's he has a record now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was a never Trumper in 2016 because he didn't have a record and I didn't trust him. In 2020, he had a record. I knew who I was voting for. Okay, well, all of these people who are talking about how if Trump strikes Iran, it's suddenly Iraq 2.0. Do you remember what happened in Syria? Everyone seems to have forgotten this, that everyone lost their
covered
mind.
well either.
Yeah, it wasn't covered well, in large part because it was kind of a nothing burger. Is a lot of the, isolationist leaning parts of America First lost their mind when he ordered airstrikes, which included some special operations people in and around Syria, because of Assad's use of chemical weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was it. Everyone was screaming, he's doing it again. It's Iraq 2.0. They said Iraq 2.0 in his first administration when he ordered the airstrikes on Syria. And what did he do? He ordered airstrikes on Syria. There was some special operations shenanigans that happened, and then that was it. Done. We have a template. We have precedents for the kinds of things that he will do. Soleimani, he ordered a strike on Soleimani for good reason, and then that was that. in his first administration. Why are you people losing your minds over this? I don't want to say the A word, but it's hard not to think you're just anti-Semitic when you're losing your ever-loving mind because we might support Israel in these strikes on Iran when, again, we have precedents from his first administration.
Okay, so let's look at this psychologically. I talked about death cults. People have, and probably rightfully so, talked about nuclear arms in a positive way, in that they have prevented another world war. Because if we have another world war, then at some point they would have to be used, and nobody wants that. Putin doesn't want it. We don't want it. Who else has nuclear arms?
Pakistan and India.
Yeah. Pakistan, India, they
Even
don't
with
want
all
it.
of their tensions with each other, and they've had for 30 years now, I think is how
Just
long
recently.
No, I mean that's how long they've had nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And despite all of their tensions and low scale conflicts, it's never come to nuclear war.
Yeah, and so nuclear weapons may have been the deterrent for a major altercation in the world. When our history is war. I always talk about when I was at Warwick Castle and I was walking through the bricks that had the dates of every time it was defended, and I'm like, that's just long enough to go back to the other kingdom, get more troops, and come back. That's basically how it was, and
Yeah.
yeah, okay, so people credit that, and it actually might be correct. If you got somebody open carry, are you going to mug that guy, or are you going to go look for an easier target, right? And but here's the flip side to this, and this is where I come to the country in question, Iran. If you have a culture of people who will tie a bomb to themselves and run into a crowded area and blow themselves up for the glory of it, do they care if it starts a conflict that will blow their own self up if they achieve their goal of blowing up who they wanted? No, because they did what they had to do. And they're going to be celebrated in their afterlife. That's why those arms cannot be in those hands, because the pact would not hold, because every country that has it now cares.
There's also an America First element here that I think is sorely missed. And when I first heard the news about these massive airstrikes, and how successful they were, that this operation Israel, it was just this weekend, wasn't it? I mean, it's only been going on for a few days.
Yeah, just a couple days. Yeah.
One of my first thoughts is the only problem I have with this is it should have been us, and it should have been done 15 plus years ago. So for anyone who doesn't know, a major chunk of the casualties that we took, the deaths and injuries that we took in Iraq, came straight from Iran. Iran is the one who provided the funding, the material, and the training to turn IEDs from a dangerous annoyance into a deadly threat. So somewhere around 600 to 700 of the deaths that occurred in Iraq are, depending on what source I have seen, as directly attributable to Iran. So if you are America First, then you are a don't mess with us. Is we're not going to go intervening and being the world police on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you mess with us, if you mess with any of our people, we will come down on you like, well, just ask Japan. We will unleash the sun twice. So there is an America First element here of no, they are way past due for a spanking. And again, that doesn't mean you're suddenly going to get a Marine Expeditionary Unit off of the coast and, get the 1st Infantry Division ready to go to invade the. No, it just means we have ordnance and we're going to use it and we are going to cripple your facilities that you use to attack us and our allies and our shipping.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Israel has done. Now, the problem is they probably can't finish the job themselves, primarily because of the bunker busters. So far as I know, we are the only ones that have bunker buster bombs because they're really freaking big and really freaking expensive. And even if you control the airspace, you still probably don't want to deploy something like that in a non-stealth aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the B2 is for. And that's why there are B2s sitting in Diego Garcia right now, is for that deterrent effect. B-52s as well, because they can stand off and launch cruise missiles. So my thinking and my hope is that what Trump is doing right now, and the reason he left the G7 early, is I'm thinking and hoping that what he's doing with his advisors is saying, okay, how can we make the most impact with the smallest footprint and without getting entangled?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he truthed and then tweeted or xed, basically. I mean, he throws things out there in the ether for people to hear, and it was the message was basically, to paraphrase, "Hey, Soleimani, we know where you are."
Khomeini. Soleimani's the dead one.
Oh yeah. Thanks for the correction. But he's like, we know where you are. You might want to just go ahead and pack up and leave, and that was basically it. It was, we're gonna go ahead and take you out if you don't, but we don't want to. But balls in your court.
Well, that's another good point, because keep in mind, for a solid 2 months before Israel unleashed these strikes, Trump was trying to make a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And he has made deals with other Middle Eastern countries before. And the deal is, hey, you want to make money? You want to be our business partners? There is money to be made here, guys. Let's knock it off with the constant, violence, warfare, sectarianism, saber rattling, and all this. And the Abrahamic Accords were a big effing deal in his first administration. Every, since the founding of Israel, pretty much every administration has rolled that rock up the hill only for it to come rolling back down on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump managed to do something that none of the rest had done with the Abrahamic Accords. And it was in large part because he was willing to make deals and he was willing to sweeten the pot. And the more rational members of the Middle Eastern community said, you know what? Yeah, we'll take that deal. Let's focus on business instead of the ideological craziness. Not in Iran. That regime cared more about the violence and the death cult than making a deal. At any point in the last 2 months, they could have made a deal, and they didn't, they wouldn't, or they couldn't, because they're so trapped by, to your point, their death cult mentality. Well, time to reap the whirlwind.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Any other topics before we sign out?
No, I think we'll see what happens. Right now, I think this is Iraq 2.0, this is going to lead to World War III people are all looking kind of silly because none of that is happening. All of the people that you thought prior to this, that some of the punditry said, no, we can't go after Iran because this country and that country and that country and this group and that group will join in. Iran's kind of on its own right now. So far, it hasn't spun out of control. So here's hoping it stays that way.
Yeah. It's a lot. And I hope gosh, when was it? 2010. I worked with airstrike operations, which would be the guys you were talking about that would go in for because they mark the targets. I hope anybody I knew from there isn't part of this, because I saw too many not come back sometimes. So yeah. Oh, heavy episode, man. Heavy episode. Like, if you made it this far, hopefully you've liked and subscribed. Uh, share us with your friends. That's my sign out right there.
Well, we'll make it lighthearted next time because I've got some. I went down an interesting Wheel of Time rabbit hole, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, and if Scott and I isomorphic are out there. Um, I have some interesting Demandrid thoughts and some interesting Demandrid facts that I came across that made me go, wait, what? And I'm curious to see what y'all will think.
All right. Well, we Saturday we'll be there next time. So,
Yep. We'll see y'all then.
all right, later.